So this next introduction takes a little bit of an explanation and a preamble, because it's a little bit unusual what we're doing here. Ragdale, if you haven't been on campus recently, but you know campus, you are going to be surprised setting foot there to see this beautiful new building, where the Friends studio once stood, which was this beautiful double studio. A lot of character. It was a little bit crumbly, a little bit hazardous with the way the loft things were set up. It has moved on to the great beyond, and we have built, or it has been built, I guess, I didn't have nothing to do with it, a beautiful double studio. One side is an incredible choreography and dance studio that is out of anyone's dreams. The windows to the prairie, beautiful natural light, absolutely incredible. And the other side is a composer's studio with absolutely amazing acoustics. I'm a big piano snob. They have a great piano. It is absolutely stunning. And that is due largely to our partnership with the Morrison-Shearer Foundation. Morrison-Shearer was a choreographer and dancer about whom you will hear more in a minute. She had, she is no longer with us. She wrote a memoir that is the book that's for sale back there. And so we have here, speaking, I hope partly for himself, because he is an artist, but also representing Morrison-Shearer and her legacy, we have Scott Lundius. Scott was born and raised in St. Louis and began his career as a professional dancer. Soon moved to New York City, where he joined the Jose Limon Dance Company and toured internationally as an ensemble member and soloist. And since retiring as a performer, he has worked in the arts and culture sector with organizations in New York and now in Illinois, with the Chicago Dancemakers Forum, Marwen, Old Town School of Folk Music, the National Public Housing Museum, and most recently, as the executive director of the Morrison-Shearer Foundation. And we welcome him up here. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I have the real pleasure of sharing some of the words that Sybil wrote herself in her autobiography, to let her speak, and I think you'll see by the time we end how relevant it is to the work of Ragdale and the artists who make work there. So, not being a writer myself, it's really an honor to be here with such a beautiful and luminary group of authors. Sybil founded the Morrison-Shearer Foundation in 1991 as a repository for her life's work as a celebrated dancer, choreographer, and writer. Along with that of the creative collaborator of more than 40 years, her creative collaborator, Helen Balfour Morrison, noted photographer and filmmaker. So near the end of her life in 2005, Sybil gave herself the task to write an account of her experience of being an artist. The resulting 3-volume autobiography, Without Wings, The Way is Steep, is a collection of letters and recollections of her rich and remarkable life. So, as a young girl, at the age of about 10 or 11, her mother took her to see Anna Pavlova dance in a performance in upstate New York on one of her international tours. And in Sybil's own words, she was, quote, carried away. She pleaded with her mother to meet Pavlova after the performance at the stage door, where, as she stood there before her, asking for her autograph, their gazes met. Of that moment, Sybil writes in her book, she said, I had fallen in love with her, with the dance, and with the theater. So as a young woman studying English at Skidmore College a few years later in Saratoga Springs, Sybil struggled with a then unnameable impulse that was rising in her. She attended every ballet performance she could see that was available to her. She writes about seeing Massine and the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo. She saw the Kurt Joost and his company perform in 1934. But ultimately, none of it appealed to her. Something else was calling her, but she couldn't quite discern what it was. In the first chapter, she writes these words. I went back to school And for the first time in my life, I did not sleep all night. I tried to sort things out. I knew I was going to be a dancer. I made up my mind, and besides, it was in me. By the morning, I had covered every thought that I had ever had about dance. 3 years earlier, I had written, "The passion that has so long possessed me of being different, of really never copying or being independent or first, has mounted so high in me that tonight, at least, it insists on my believing that such emotions of mine were not intended to be expressed by any of the present existing art forms, but could only be revealed to the world in a new form of art, a new language of expression." And mind you, this was the 1930s. It was only a couple decades after Isadora Duncan first took off her shoes and danced. So it was a new field of dance and theater that I wanted. As soon as the Skidmore Library was open that next day, I was there looking at every book on the subject. Among them was John Martin's The Modern Dance. And the phrase that caught my eye was, "The modern dance is not a technique. It is a point of view." So this was the answer. I wanted to be a discoverer. My medium was movement. Even acting was action. As though I thought through many phases. It all went together. Dance as technique, dance as acting, dance as poetry, dance as painting and design, dance as music and rhythm, dance as life, as soul, as spirit. This was the life I wanted, no matter how long it took. As for my preferring to be an artist, well, there is no choice. I am an artist. I know that because only at moments when I am creating or giving and receiving creations am I really happy and alive. Actually, I can't even imagine life without those moments. Perhaps the difference is that artists are so intense that when they are not creating, they feel as miserable emotionally as they would physically if some organ were not functioning properly. And at the close of the first volume, chronicling her years as a rising artist in New York, she writes, "In the fall of 1942, I moved to Chicago, where a whole new life awaited me. Suddenly, I was in a different atmosphere, an atmosphere of infinite possibilities. The light in New York had been brilliant, reflected on cold, hard streets, the rock below, and the buildings above, which cast sharp shadows against the cool sun. Even blinded for a day by rain, it shone back the next day as brilliantly cool as ever. There was no fog or mist in the city, and the country was distant and difficult to achieve. So a new wind blew in my face as I stepped onto the plains where the sky begins with the earth. A mysterious mist rose from the landscape as Chicago seeped into the country and blended with it. This was not just a move from one city to another. It was a move from one world to the next. At the age of 30, I found myself in a magical place, with long vistas, groves of oaks and savannas and forests preserved by Jens Jensen, the master landscape architect. I became aware of the rising and setting sun, the rising and setting of the changing moons. This was the Midwest, the place that the philosopher Alfred Whitehead had said was the seedbed of creativity, out of which so many artists had come. The stage was set. Everything called for me to create in a new way.